breaking news came out today that Manny Pacquiao Promotions president, he stated that the Crawford fight is nonsense after reports came out literally the other day of Manny Pacquiao and Crawford being in heavy negotiations to fight on June 5th in Abu Dhabi, according to The Athletic. However, apparently today is a new day for a new story, as things seem to take a left turn for Terence "Bud" Crawford. Earlier today, Manny Pacquiao Promotions president Gibbons stated, and I quote, "This is Bob Arum and Mike Coppinger nonsense. I do not believe that is happening." End of the quote. Now, if Manny Pacquiao Promotions president Gibbons doesn't believe the fight is going to happen, then we have no reason to believe that the fight is actually going to happen. Now, keep in mind that Gibbons was responding directly to Pacquiao supposedly fighting Crawford next in June. Therefore, this completely shuts down the notion of Pacquiao fighting Crawford, since Gibbons said it's nonsense. Usually in the sport of boxing or anywhere, what makes dollars make sense. However, apparently $40 million is nonsense according to Gibbons, because that's the amount of money Pacquiao requested to fight Crawford this time around. Initially it was $20 million, and now it's $40 million. It seemed like Pacquiao was trying to price himself out in order to find a way out of the Crawford fight, because he had requested to fight Crawford for $20 million before the pandemic. And all of a sudden, during the pandemic, Pacquiao is now requesting $40 million to fight Crawford. Now, luckily for Pacquiao, Bob Arum actually found an investor that's willing to put up that type of money. And then out of nowhere, Pacquiao turns down $40 million to fight Crawford next, because according to Gibbons, is nonsense. Which that comment alone doesn't make a whole lot of sense, since $40 million make all the sense in the world. After all, it was Manny Pacquiao who requested that type of money. Beside the fact that it was Pacquiao himself, a few months ago, he stated out of his own mouth 3 fighters he's looking to make his comeback against: Conor McGregor, Errol Spence, and Terence Crawford. Obviously, we can go ahead and eliminate Conor McGregor since he's coming off a loss. Also, Pacquiao was trying to negotiate a fight with Ryan, in which he ended up losing his WBA super belt in the process for taking Ryan too seriously while he was clout chasing. So there was also that incident. Now, if we're looking at the realistic options for Manny Pacquiao at the moment in time, there's Crawford, Errol Spence, Mikey Garcia, even Oscar De La Hoya in an exhibition bout. However, if we are going based off what Manny Pacquiao wanted, he only had a few options on the table, which is Errol Spence and Crawford. Therefore, if this is Pacquiao demand, how is Gibbons claiming the fight is nonsense if this is what Pacquiao wants? It was Pacquiao that also demanded the $40 million. So again, how is that nonsense when this is the fight that Pacquiao wants with the amount of money he requested? How can Manny Pacquiao Promotions president Gibbons call Pacquiao his boss demands nonsense? See, it's one thing if the fans demanded this fight and Gibbons came out and said, "You guys have to hold up. Crawford is the #1 pound for pound." On the other hand, Pacquiao is 41 years old. He's too old for Crawford. This fight is completely nonsense at the moment in time for Pac-Man. See, that will have made all the sense in the world. However, that's not the case. It was Pacquiao himself that wanted this fight and requested $40 million to take this fight. But as soon as Pacquiao received his wishes, few days later, MP Promotions President Gibbons wants to claim the fight is nonsense. We know what time it is. Pacquiao never had the intentions to fight Crawford for the obvious reasons. Since 5 years ago, Pacquiao always viewed Crawford as a major threat. Pacquiao's own trainer, Freddie Roach, he came out and said that Crawford is the next pound for pound. Now, mind you, this was years ago when Floyd Mayweather and Pacquiao was still active. Freddie Roach also said the moment Crawford beat his fighter Postal that Crawford is like a Floyd Mayweather with power. That's some really high praise if you ask me. And then a few moments later, Freddie Roach said that black fighters don't sell when he was asked about Crawford versus Pacquiao. We all know what time it is because that comment really didn't make any sense at all, since the biggest fight of all time on pay-per-view was Floyd Mayweather versus Pacquiao, in which one fighter happened to be black. So regardless of the excuse Freddie wants to use, it's not going to work since he already revealed too much of the truth. Furthermore, this is bad news for Crawford, since the Pacquiao fight was going to take Bud to superstar status. This is the passing of the torch, which is why it will always fall back on Bob and Top Rank for not making this fight come to fruition. Instead, they allowed this fight to fall apart because, truth be told, they should have made this fight 5 years ago when Pacquiao was still signed with Top Rank. I will never forget the day when Manny Pacquiao turned down a Crawford fight 5 years ago. Bob Arum came out and said he could care less because he cares about Manny Pacquiao's health. Fast forward 5 years later, Manny Pacquiao still kicking ass till this day. Therefore, at the moment in time is plan B for Crawford. Sean Porter is a perfect substitute. Even though Sean Porter is not a Manny Pacquiao type of a name that will elevate Crawford to superstar status. Nevertheless, Porter is still a great fight. A pay-per-view fight, in fact, that will put respect on Crawford's name at the welterweight division. So he should definitely explore that option, which most likely he will, since Bud said out of his own mouth, if it's not Pacquiao, it will be Porter. And last but not least, boxing is in a bad state. One day, reports come out of a mega fight that's being negotiated. The next day, the fight falls apart. This have been the trend in the sport of boxing as of late. Matter of fact, Eddie Hearn came out earlier this week claiming the AJ versus Fury fight will be announced this week. Now we at the end of the week, and there is no announcement being made. This have been the story for the past 6 months when it comes to the Fury versus AJ fight. Every week, Eddie Hearn comes out and says, next week, the announcement is coming. Every 2 weeks, Eddie Hearn have been repeating the same thing. It's like we in a cycle. See, what's hurting the sport of boxing is not the fact that there isn't great fighters or great fights to be made. Absolutely not. It's the contrary, in fact. Can you imagine if Oscar Valdez is willing to fight Shakur, Tank is fighting Ryan instead of Ryan out here clout chasing everybody, Teofimo living up to his word fighting Devin Haney, Charlo fighting David Benavidez or Canelo, Errol Spence fighting Crawford, and the list goes on and on from Fury versus Wilder trilogy. If these fights happen this year, boxing will automatically become the #1 sport, just like it used to be back in Muhammad Ali days. If the best fight the best in boxing, then we don't have to settle for Logan Paul versus a UFC fighter, YouTubers versus TikTokers. This is becoming a trend. all these exhibitions. I done heard Cotto is fighting Marquez, Chavez Jr. is fighting Silver from the UFC. Chavez Sr. is supposedly fighting Camacho Jr. I mean, boxing is like all over the place because the best is not fighting the best. And if the best do fight the best, that will definitely set up a bigger year to follow. More importantly, the biggest problem in boxing today is that the fans, old media, and the decaf wizards themselves, they all trying their best to justify ducking, which makes it worse for the hardcore boxing fans, because now we really don't get to see the fights we want to see. Thanks to these fighters fans, because they truly not boxing fans, they just a fighter fan. Instead of pushing for the best versus the best, they try to justify why their favorite fighter is doing all of the ducking in the world. The Canelo fans are a perfect example. So that, combined with politics, is the reason why these fighters aren't being pressured to fight the best. With that being stated, even though the Pacquiao fight for Crawford will have performed wonders, still the Sean Porter fight is a perfect substitute, since it's a good test and a pay-per-view worthy fight. With that being stated, drop your thoughts in the comment section below, subscribe below, and click on the notification bell to be continued on the next episode of Akhi, Akhi TV. Peace, and we on to the next one.
Sean Porter tweeted something and he added you. He said, listen, I'll be ready for May. And then you said something about, just stand by. You're trying me. What did you mean by that?
I just told him to stand by, you know what I mean? I've been seeing the little slick stuff that Sean been saying here lately, I'll be watching. So I just told him to stand by, because if the fight that we're working on don't go through, then for sure.
And that's Pacquiao, you mean?
For sure. If that fight, don't go through, then for sure we'll visit that fight, and then, we can get it on.
How close are you guys to making that Pacquiao fight happen? And if it is close, is it going to be somewhere in Saudi Arabia like Bobby alluded to some time back?
We have to see, man. I don't know too much details. We have to see.